All right, 100 facts about Thomas Jefferson. Let's go. Okay, Thomas Jefferson was um, similar to George Washington. Thomas Jefferson was technically born on 2 days. He was originally born on April 2nd, but with the adoption of the Gregorian calendar, he his birthday got switched to April the 13th. So that's something. When he was 9 years old, they adopted the Gregorian calendar, and his birthday was bumped up by at least 11 days. And speaking of 11, here's 10. He was one of 10 children. He was the third, and he was the first boy. So he, of course, had two other older sisters. Um, Fact four, as the eldest son, he had inherited between 5,000 and 7,000 acres of land. To put that in perspective, let's just say that the lowest he inherited was 5,000 acres. The White House is only 18 acres, so a person could fit 277 White Houses in his land if they wanted to. Okay, citation number 6. He made a noticeable purchase when it came to the Louisiana Purchase. He purchased around 530 million acres. To put that in perspective, 530 million acres could fit 19 Virginias. If you're talking about like regular Virginia, but at that time, Thomas Jefferson, Virginia had West Virginia in it. So if you include West Virginia, it's only 12. Speaking of 12, here's half. Six languages he spoke. Six languages fluently: French, English, Greek, Italian, Latin, and Spanish. So that's pretty cool. He's the one who popularized French fries and mac and cheese. That's pretty cool. Speaking of languages, one of the languages he studied but did not conquer and read fluently was Arabic. He even owned his own Quran. Citation 12. Um, Speaking of 12, we should have called 12 because, Sally Hemings, Thomas Jefferson's supposed sex pet. Well, he was friendly with her brother, James Hemings, who used to cook for him. And he even served him French fries, which he got from, of course, France. Here's another thing: Thomas Jefferson owned his own Quran and even studied Arabic. Up, that's a repeat. Well, both of them are repeat. Well, it's too late. Of course, he, as a Christian, owned his own Bible, but you know what? He cut it up, and what he had cut up became later on the Jefferson Bible. And after he died, of course, they passed the Jefferson Bible around Congress. Here's another fact. Of course, Thomas Jefferson was called by his opponents a Unitarian. Here's another fact: Thomas Jefferson was the first Secretary of State, second Vice President, and third President overall, a 1, 2, 3 sweep. Here's another lovely fact. Depending on who you believe, Thomas Jefferson either had the first or second child born in the White House. So that's pretty cool. Here's a less disputed fact. Um, During Thomas Jefferson administration, he had Lewis and Clark travel over 8,000 miles. To put that in perspective, to travel from Florida to Maine is only 2,000 miles. So they travel four times that distance. They travel four times the coast distance. Here's another citation: Thomas Jefferson is on the nickel. And who suggested him be on the nickel? It was FDR, which makes sense because FDR is on the dime. Here's another citation. Thomas Jefferson was the first one sworn in Washington D.C., and was the first one to live in the White House. Then called the president's house for his entire presidency. Although uh, John Adams was the first one to occupy it. Thomas Jefferson fled during a invasion of Virginia in 1781 while he was the governor. So, boop, boop, chicken, chicken, chicken. He fled from the he fled as a governor. So yeah, that's kind of sad. But hey, have to say your own tale, I guess. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams were rivals, but alas, both of them died on July 4th, 1826, 50 years after the Declaration of Independence was signed. How epic of a death can you get, man? 50 years. Talk about veto proof majorities. Thomas Jefferson had the first veto free presidency. And when and his library was so vast that he actually sold it to Congress. It was about 6,700 books. And Thomas Jefferson was a very known scientist when it came to documenting fossils. And Thomas Jefferson also likely was the most accused black one of the most accused persons ever when it comes to being black. He comes only second to like Abraham Washington. His opponents constantly called him a mulatto, and they said he fathered six mulatto children with Sally Hemings. Thomas Jefferson also, when it came to talking about freedom, he was a freedom nut, but still that didn't stop him from owning 600 slaves, sadly. Thomas Jefferson arguably was the first president with a full row of teeth. Not only did he own them slaves, he owned them teeth. He owned them teeth. When it comes to Thomas Jefferson, he founded the University of Virginia and named three accomplishments on his gravestone. Him as the author of the Declaration of Independence, author of the Statutes of Virginia Religious Freedom, and the father of the University of Virginia. Thomas Jefferson's slave Sally Hemings was the half sister of his wife. So yeah, kind of similar to Judge and half sister of George Washington's wife, also too. Martha, both of them married a woman named Martha. Isn't that interesting? Martha was in the top 10 female names when it came to the founding father era. So Thomas Jefferson, after his wife died, he burned all their papers to keep their secrecy because he knew he was famous. Thomas Jefferson created various items. He created a polygraph, which at that time only copied letters, not figured out if you were lying or not. Thomas Jefferson never addressed whether he slept with Sally Hemings or not, but he was a very private man, i.e., that's why he burned them papers. But maybe he was hiding something. I don't know. Sally Hemings' brother played a definite role this time. Robert Hemings, he was like his valet, and remember James was his personal chef. So when it came to children, Thomas Jefferson had 12 children, six with his wife and supposedly six with Sally Hemings. And a good portion of them died, at least like half of them. So it was crazy. Most of them with his wife. Sally Hemings had some good genes. Most of her children survived. How could I say this? Um, so yeah, it was believed that Thomas Jefferson impregnated a third woman, Mary Hemings Bell, who got the bell from her common law husband, some white guy who purchased her and then freed her later on. Thomas Jefferson funded a enemy of George Washington named Philip. Philip would write very nasty stuff about George Washington, and Thomas Jefferson would fund him to give you. And at this time, Thomas Jefferson was the Secretary of State. So to give you context, it's like if Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State now, funded somebody like Tucker Carlson to write icky stuff about Donald Trump. So that's how big it was. Thomas Jefferson is on the $2 bill, but original his rival was on there. Hamilton, he was on the $2 bill first. One more, Thomas Jefferson. A lot of people give George Washington credit for running apolitical when it came to the presidency, but Thomas Jefferson did it first when it came to the governorship of Virginia. He ran apolitical with no parties whatsoever. Here's some more facts. Thomas Jefferson was the second governor when it came to the post crown governors of Virginia. Try to say that three times fast. Which predated the presidency. 7 out of the 12 of Thomas Jefferson's children died in infancy or early childhood. So yeah, that's pretty sad. Thomas Jefferson at least visited like 5 countries when he was alive. Of course, George Washington only visited one. So yeah, those 5 countries are respectively France, Great Britain, Italy, the Netherlands, and of course, last but not least, Germany. Germany was pretty big at the time. The first drafting of the blah, blah, Declaration of Independence had a strong condemning of slavery. It had a strong condemning of slavery, but South Carolina and Georgia wasn't feeling it. They made him take that out, like, scrap it. So Thomas Jefferson went to William and Mary College to study law. So yes, that's pretty big. Monticello means little mountain in Italian. Remember, I told you that Thomas Jefferson spoke Italian. Of course, his graveyard plaque, of course, acknowledge his 3 accomplishments. Deja vu, I guess. Um, Thomas Jefferson was, of course, great emancipator, but he only emancipated 2 slaves. Some of these are similar, but different in like detail. So yeah, that's something. So yeah, Thomas Jefferson is often credited for the ice cream recipe. He first started vanilla. He of course had like a vanilla like concoction that was very popular at the time. So yeah, that was pretty big. So yeah, when it came to Thomas Jefferson, fact number 54, Thomas Jefferson was the only vice president who defeated a sitting president. So that's pretty cool. It was John Adams. So yeah, imagine if like George Herbert Bush defeated Ronald Reagan in 84. That's how big it was. So yeah, Thomas Jefferson was known for his casual wear throughout the White House, which contrasted sharply with George Washington and John Adams, who were more regal and tried to be respectful. Thomas Jefferson created the swivel chair, so if you spin around and stuff like that, thanks Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson believed that basically civil disorder and rioting was a need when it came to like a healthy republic. Martin Luther King once said like rioting is the language of the unheard or so forth. Yeah, Thomas Jefferson thought of that first. He even had this famous quote where it says the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots. So yeah, he also had this quote that said, I cannot live without books. I thought that that was cute. Thomas Jefferson had a parakeet named Dick. So yeah, he also couldn't live without Dick. So and Thomas Jefferson supported an idea called nullification, even though he did not use the term at the time, which thought that states could nullify federal law. Now that's not big today, but hey, he He believed it. He also created a unique clock dial for Monticello. That was pretty big. Um, and of course, let's see, Sally Hemings had two elder children, which left and pretended to be white. They passed as white because Sally Hemings was part white, and Thomas Jefferson, also being white, meant that her children were probably over 70% white. Thomas Jefferson had a great debt when he died. He definitely feared it, which tied into like fact number 20. Thomas Jefferson used a black mathematician named Benjamin, and definitely he showed him off to show that African Americans can be smart and educated, because he had that strange tie-in with liberty, even though he owned slaves, yada yada yada. It's just crazy. Thomas Jefferson thought that if somebody served more than 2 terms, that the president would be a monarch. So yeah. So here, fact number 69: Thomas Jefferson studied astronomy. Thomas Jefferson also designed his own casket, which was kind of weird. Thomas Jefferson, again, this tying into an earlier fact, Thomas Jefferson cut out many of the miracles that happened throughout the Bible to just get strictly to the teachings of Jesus Christ. And also, he read the Bible in Greek, Latin, French, and English. So yeah, that's pretty nice. Um, of course, he didn't really care about the divinity of Christ. He privately researched the Bible for decades. Well, actually, his Jefferson Bible was kept secret for decades because it could like cause a fuss because he didn't believe in the divinity of Christ. He served as a key correspondent to two future presidents, the James Madison and James Monroe. They were called the Virginia Dynasty, all that. Thomas Jefferson is known as like the second founder of the Library of Congress. That's nice. Thomas Jefferson's favorite dessert was, of course, ice cream. Remember, he was like the founding father of ice cream. Thomas Jefferson, as a young lad, took slave cases pro bono. That means he did it for free, which was nice for him. Thomas Jefferson loved the press. He had this big, lengthy quotation about how he loves the press, how instead of a government, he would want a newspaper. But then he changed his mind over the years because the press started like getting on him and insulting him, really hurting his feelings. Of course, George Washington confronted him about funding Mr. Phillip, and saying slanderous things about him. I mean, how would you like it if your employee funds you like your greatest enemy? So yeah, that's something. So yeah, Lewis and Clark was sent to do a secret mission to find like the Northwest Passage, all water passage between the Atlantic and the Pacific Island. They thought a lot of kooky stuff. Thomas Jefferson wanted them to also find this hairy elephant. It wasn't like a mammoth or so forth. So yeah, again, thought a lot of kooky stuff. Thomas Jefferson was part of this organization with Lewis and Clark, so forth. Thomas Jefferson owed like $107,000. It's equivalent to millions today because there was a difference when it comes to inflation. And eventually he had to sell off after his death his 130 slaves to pay his debts. So that was one of the reasons he didn't free the slaves. He spent like over 40 years in Monticello building up debts and so forth for his family. Um, of course, this gives more detail to how Thomas Jefferson was a theist or a Unitarian. Um, and Isaac Jefferson, his slave, called him a good master. Now, this was, of course, after Thomas Jefferson died, so there wasn't really any reason. And by this time, Isaac Jefferson was already freed for like over 30 years at this time. He was quoted in the 1840s. So there was no ulterior motives for him like to like lie. And we're at the final countdown. The final facts. Woo! 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 Yeah. So yeah, so yeah, fact number 90: Thomas Jefferson had a secret code for his seeds, so nobody would steal his seed recipe. Kind of sus. Thomas Jefferson also perfected this this chair, this rolling chair thing that was pretty impressive. So yeah, fact number 92. Thomas Jefferson original draft of the Declaration of Independence is missing. The little rough draft of which him, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin wrote together was kind of like missing. Kind of really sucked. He was the fan of a different measuring um, um, when it comes to like measurements. He was a fan of a differing measuring system, akin to what the British had. He was a fan of wine. He was a wine connoisseur. He picked that up in France. Remember, he speaks French. Here's a fact that ties into his little copy, his letter copying machine, so forth, and how it breaks it down. Another thing about how Thomas Jefferson had stuff written on his casket, and so forth. And here's another thing about his feud. His feud with Alexander Hamilton was so strict, was so like they were so on each other's neck that George Washington had to sit them down and force them to eat together. That's how bad it was. So they can just, how your mom forces you to sometimes eat with your brother if you're really beefing with him. Yeah, Thomas Jefferson was sat down like a little kid by George Washington to eat with Hamilton. So the guy on the $2 bill and the guy on the $10 bill, they of course were beefing. And of course his grandson had to sell away all his assets, all his slaves to pay for his debts, his incredible debts. That was sad. It was kept a secret that he died on July 4th, not to keep the people down. And of course, his protege, John Madison, became the president, which ties into our next 100 facts. So that's 100 facts about Thomas Jefferson. Of course, link will be in the description. And I am out. I hope you enjoyed that.